Baseball is back, and at Team Toyota, savings and selection are back too. With tons of new Toyota SUVs, trucks, and hybrids to choose from, and with our lineup of over 200 certified used Toyotas, you can find the right fit for you and your budget. Plus, our service and collision centers are here to get you back in the game in no time. Visit one of our 3 locations in Princeton, Langhorne, or Glen Mills, or online at teamtoyota.net.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. Joined by Corey Seidman, I am Spencer McKercher, and Core, man, it has been a while. We've had a few busy schedules here, but we're back on track. Thanks for listening. We're excited to get this one going. A lot to cover. We'll start. I was going to ask you where you want to start. Then pre-show here, we finally were like, all right, I think we need to talk about maybe the most important thing. That's Bryce Harper's health. Coming off a doubleheader on Thursday night against the Braves, Bryce Harper did not play in either one of those games after getting hit by the pitch on Tuesday by Spencer Strider, who clarified that he's not a sociopath and has a little empathy for Bryce Harper after getting hit.
That's what they all say. No, I'm just kidding.
Right, exactly. And, we'll get to retribution and retaliation here down the road. But Rob Thompson mentioned after the game that Bryce was doing better. He had a positive day overall. He didn't hit in the cage. But then he did say that there's a chance that he could miss a few games. However, no IL. Your takeaway from Bryce's potential injury.
Yeah, Thompson said after the doubleheader that Harper was still sore. He was sore throughout the day. Sounds like he's going to miss a couple games in this Brewers series. Obviously, Harper wants to get back in the lineup as fast as humanly possible, but he's also responsible about these things, and he's not going to do more damage to himself or try to affect his swing and potentially affect other body parts. He's dealt with so much of this through the years, these scary hit-by pitches. Think back to 2021, got hit in the face and wrist. 2022, left thumb, Blake Snell. 2024, left elbow. This spring, he was hit on the right arm, then right elbow. Harper takes exception whenever a pitcher comes up and in on him like that. I mean, because he's sick of being hit. It's scary. He deals with it a lot. That's a zone where pitchers know to attack him because it's one of the exploitable zones against a lot of left-handed hitters is up and in. But this, it's not great for the Phillies. Obviously, the Phillies are playing very good baseball, half game behind the Tigers for the best record in all of baseball. But they'll have Harper back in the lineup in the short term. It seems like Thompson did say it doesn't seem like it'll require an IL stint. But, it's scary when this stuff happens. I know the talk all week has been about retaliation and all that. And, yeah, I mean, there's some of that because you don't want teams feeling like they can just freely come up and in. But is that really, if you hit Sean Murphy with a pitch on Thursday or something, is that going to prevent pitchers from attacking Bryce Harper up and in over the course of the season? No. I mean, common sense would say no. I think sometimes it's like a symbolic gesture that's meaningful. I'm not totally dismissing it. And maybe the Phillies at some point down the road will hit a Brave. But I just think that it's more so that's where pitchers are trying to throw pitches to Bryce Harper. Sometimes they slip. More often than not, too often they've slipped, and that's why Harper gets kind of peeved at it. A lot of the time, Harper, what he's frustrated with is that if you're up at this level, you should be able to command that pitch. It shouldn't slip out of your hand. That's a minor league kind of thing. But the Phillies have been able to win games without him. They won the series against the Braves, took 2 out of 3. Did not go their way Thursday night behind Zach Wheeler, kind of a rare stumble there. But there are a lot of guys in this lineup that are clicking, and the pitching staff's just been unbelievable, specifically the starters. So, that's why the Phillies, they enter the weekend against the Brewers here, 36-20, best record in the NL, 2 games ahead of the Mets.
Yeah, and going back real quick to Bryce, I mean, it was just the topic of conversation. And I feel like it was kind of heavily weighed 50-50 of do you retaliate, do you not? Rob Thompson was asked pregame before the first game on Thursday's doubleheader, kind of why, and it's been the talk of conversation. He's like, because he didn't do it on purpose. And I agree. Again, like you said, I get Bryce's frustration, and I feel like we've had this conversation on this podcast. I completely get it, especially what he got hit twice in Sacramento against the A's. It happens way too often than not. I get where he's coming from, but I don't think he thought it was on purpose. I don't think the Phillies obviously didn't think it was on purpose. And again, this could be a thing down the road if they end up retaliating at some point. But I saw a clip for some of the Braves fans on Twitter actually started getting crazy. They were showing like in the playoff game in game 2 of the 2023 NLDS, I believe. Like Wheeler hit Acuna up and in, and like everyone's like, "Oh, well, they didn't retaliate." It's like, yeah, that's a good point. That's a playoff game. It's a little different, but
Yeah. And
I get where everyone's coming from.
Yeah, and it wasn't intentional, nor was it intentional when Blake Snell broke Harper's thumb, nor was it intentional when Genesis Cabrera threw the pitch that hit him in the face and wrist, and Harper reached out to Genesis Cabrera later that night to tell him it's okay. Yep. I forgive you. I don't think you did that intentionally. It's an emotional type situation. That's why people get so riled up. The players do themselves too. I remember talking to Castellanos earlier this season. It might have been last season, where someone like buzzed his tower, and I asked him post game, like, I saw you got like kind of gestured toward him, like, what was the source of that frustration? And his thing is just like, it's not fun getting hit. It's not fun getting buzzed like that. And that's just how guys react in the moment. Hopefully Harper's back by Sunday. Hopefully Harper's back by, that Blue Jays series coming up in Toronto, if not earlier. But the Phillies against the Brewers this weekend, that's one of the beautiful things about this roster is you have enough talent that, like, if Bryce Harper misses a couple days, you might be a day where Kyle Schwarber hits a 3-run homer. Might be a day where Nick Castellanos goes 4 for 4. And so a lot of guys clicking right now. Not everybody. I mean, I think JT Realmuto, the Phillies would like to see more out of, obviously, not performing with runners in scoring position or against lefties and hitting into a lot of double plays. But up and down the lineup, I think, if you were to look at the Philly, if you were to, put these stat lines, batting averages, OPS on the board before the season started and say this is where the Phillies are going to be on May 30, that, Trey Turner's going to be hitting over 300, that Harper, even through struggles, is still going to have a 375 OBP, that Schwarber's going to be among the league leaders in homers, that Castellanos is going to be hitting damn near 290. A lot of things are going right for the Phillies. Yeah,
you mentioned Nick Castellanos there. He had 5 hits in both those games yesterday. Incredible. And like, it's one of those things where, perfect example, we showed his little stat board during one of his at-bats, and I was like, oh my God, he's batting 290. Like, when it's the most under the radar 290 that has happened in a while. But yeah, man, it like you mentioned, everyone's hit this lineup. There is struggles. Johan Rojas only has 6 hits in the whole month of May so far. He's been struggling, kind of getting back to his older ways, which is unfortunate. He's made a great few plays in the outfield, including that one in Sacramento on Friday when he basically saved the game in the 8th inning. But I'm very pleased with the lineup, how everyone's clicking. However, how are we feeling about the bullpen, dude? There's a lot going on with this bullpen right now. There might need to be a conversation about Matt Strahm. Obviously, he struggles a little bit in the first game of Thursday's doubleheader. Ryan Kirkering is starting to settle in a little bit, but again, he's also struggling. He comes in for Christopher Sanchez in the first game on Thursday, lets up the run to make it 3-2, I believe. What are your thoughts on this bullpen going forward here? I know a lot of people are worried. I know there's trade talks already. I know there's needs and wants and demands. But what are your thoughts? What is your confidence level in this bullpen now, especially without Jose Alvarado?
I'd say right now it's like a 6 out of 10. I mean, based on what we're seeing, like Matt Strahm's a very good reliever, and he's proven that over the last few seasons. But he hasn't been the best version of himself this year. That's just the reality. Like, it doesn't mean that from this point forward he's not going to be. But to this point, he hasn't been quite as reliable as he was the last 2 years. And 2 things that really have stuck out to me with Strahm, he gave up that double last night, the go-ahead double, or the game-tying double was on an 0-2 count. His opponents this season are 3 for 11 with 2 doubles on an 0-2 count. That's a small sample size, only bringing it up because he didn't allow an extra base hit at all on an 0-2 count last season. He didn't allow an extra base hit at all on full counts last season. Those are 2 areas this season where he hasn't been able to put guys away. When he's ahead 0-2 and on full count, finishing off an at-bat, 8 of the 16 plate appearances with him on a full count have led to a base runner. And like Matt Strahm's better than that, and he's been able to be better than that over the course of time, even without like a blazing fastball. Even when he's throwing 91 miles per hour, he's able to miss bats at the top of the zone because he has deception and extension and like late finish and movement. He has all of those things, but just has not been like quite as sharp. And you have to think that it all harkens back to him missing time in spring training, having an unusual start to the season, less ramp up than he had the prior 2 years. Jordan Romano came in. I know he got a save in game 1 yesterday, but it was another heart attack there. Bases loaded, got out of it, struck a guy out looking on a pitch that was not a strike. I don't know if you heard the Braves announcers, but their call was like, no, which is exactly what T-Mac would probably be saying if that ended a game against the Phillies. But with the Alvarado suspension, if Kerkering, Strom, and Romano were all firing on all cylinders, I think people would be okay, they can offset this. The 80 games in the playoffs, and they'll get somebody at the deadline. Maybe they'll be able to offset this. But I don't know. Like, they're going to try to make do for the next 2 months, because you're not getting a closer right now or like an elite setup man without overpaying. That's just the reality of the marketplace. It's May 30th as we sit down to record this, 2 full months before the trade deadline. If you're the Tampa Bay Rays, who are probably going to sell off some relievers like a Pete Fairbanks, or the Orioles, who are probably going to consider selling off like a Felix Bautista or a Yenier Cano, right? If you trade one of those guys today, it has to be because you're getting a package that you think you're not going to be able to beat on July 25th. It has to be like so interesting that you pull the trigger. We rarely see trades made this early in the season. Luis Ariz was traded from the Marlins to the Padres early, but that was an exception, and that was with an extremely aggressive president of baseball operations and AJ Preller in San Diego. So it's kind of a unique situation here. Everybody knows the Phillies need bullpen help. I do expect them to go out and get it at some point. They have, enough interesting minor league pieces that they can trade to get a good reliever here. But over the next, 6-7 weeks, it's going to have to be Kerkering, Strom, and Romano stepping up. It's going to have to be guys like Joe Ross pitching well when given the opportunity. And Tanner Banks has stepped up a couple times here so far. That's been a pretty underrated piece of this all. We saw in Sacramento, for example, the Phillies closed out a game with Max Lazar. That was notable just because he's the last guy in the bullpen at that point, and he was able to come in and do the job. You just need guys to be able to do the job on that night, even if it's not sustainable long term, get you closer to that all-star break period, trade deadline period. Everybody knows the Phillies are going to add bullpen help at some point. This is a win now year. So many other pieces are in place. You can't let a shaky bullpen derail that. So you got to do as much as you can to add reliability to the bullpen. And we saw that last summer, even when bullpen wasn't necessarily in need, Dave Dombrowski still went out and got Carlos Estevez. So
that's a great point. The Estevez trade is always kind of talked about in terms of did it work out? Didn't it work out? Obviously, he lets up the grand slam to Lindor in Game 5, whatever, or Game 4. But again, I completely agree with you. I think there's going to be 100% be some sort of move. You have to, especially with Jose Alvarado. I don't know. We didn't get a chance to really talk. I know you did the pod. Thank you for doing that. Talking about Jose, it stinks, man. The people that are kind of coming after him, I disagree with. I can't really explain my feelings. I'm kind of right in the middle for both of it. But having him gone is a huge deal. And when he can't return until August, what do you do with him? It's kind of like that weird thing where do you pitch him in these big situations in September when actually you're going to need a Ryan Kerkering in these situations? You need Matt Strom in these situations. You're going to need Jordan Romano in these situations. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, personally, the way I feel about that is pitch him as much as possible. He's gone for the next 80 games and he's gone for the playoffs. So if this guy comes back to your team and he's in play for games 126 through 162, I think that's what it is. That's 36 games. Pitch him 20 times, let him. I mean, honestly, he's going to feel like he has something to prove too. He's going to want to come out and show that I can still throw 100 even without whatever was in my body that shouldn't have been in my body. And, I can still get outs and be reliable and be a piece of your future and a late inning reliever. So that's my perspective on it. Yeah, you want to get guys ready for the playoffs and all, but you also want to rest your relievers down the stretch. So if you know that you're not going to be using Alvarado in October, use them a ton in September. That's my stance on it. And in terms of, I don't think that he did it intentionally, but it happened. And that's just the reality of it, right? I mean, we're a couple weeks removed from it now, but the stance whenever this happens usually is guys are responsible for what they put in their body. There's so much paperwork, so much education they get about what they can and can't do that there's really no excuse when it happens. I have found it interesting, and it was natural that a talking point after the Alvarado thing would become, well, they have too many starters. How about moving Ranger Suarez to the bullpen? But Ranger Suarez is pitching so well and for several reasons, I just don't see that happening. A, he's a free agent at the end of the season. He's a Scott Boras client. You hire Scott Boras because you want to maximize your value in free agency in the marketplace. Do you think that Ranger Suarez and Scott Boras are going to be gung-ho about having your client go to the bullpen in his walk year? Not that that's the most important thing. And I'm sure Suarez would try to be a good teammate. And the Phillies are thinking about their ultimate goal this season anyway. But you have this guy come out firing 6 2/3, 7 shutout innings several times in a row. Suarez has a 1.01 ERA over his last 4 starts. So he's been almost as locked in as he was at the beginning of last year, minus his first start this season.
Yeah, and dude, he's had 3 shutout starts in his 5 starts this season. He allowed 7 earned in the first one this season, and then on May 16th he allowed 3 earned runs, and now he's back-to-back starts without allowing a run. I've been super impressed with Ranger, and I'm glad you brought him up. Again, yeah, he's kind of in that form where I feel the same way I did in May of last season, where it's like Ranger takes the mound. I feel confident that he's going to find a little bit of trouble, but then get through it, kind of battle through it, be that calm demeanor on the mound, just kind of get through everything. He's been fantastic. All those pitches are working. There's so many different pitches that you might not see the same pitch in all 3 of your at bats. You won't see the same pitch twice in all 3. True. It's such a mix of pitches for Ranger, and he gets you out on all of them. We talk about the trade deadline. You just mentioned Scott Boras. Who knows? I don't know if you need a big bullpen piece. Say, I don't know if the Orioles would want Ranger Suarez. I mean, I'm sure they would.
I know where you're going with this, but I just don't see that happening. I know
no way, right?
You're saying would they trade Ranger because he's a free agent at the end of the season? No. Theoretically it could happen, but I feel like every year, and it's not just in Philadelphia, this gets talked about in numerous cities where people say, well, if the guy's going to be a free agent anyway, you might as well. And the only time I can ever remember it actually happening is when the Yankees traded Aroldis Chapman and then got him back, right? I think so. That exactly. is it so rarely happens. It would make you worse in 2025 if you do that, because you'd be trading a contributing member of your starting rotation and a guy who can fill multiple roles in the postseason. So I just don't see a way that makes you better. The only way I would do that is if you're getting another organization's top prospect, which you're not getting for a rental anyway. But with Suarez, it underscores the point that one of the benefits of having such a deep rotation, it's not just that, okay, you have 5 guys who are really good. It's that when guys are struggling, you have 60% of the rotation that is still producing. Ranger Suarez is on a roll right now. Jesus Luzardo has looked really good, multiple starts in a row. Even when he hasn't looked good, he's looked good, right? Zach Wheeler, I know he had a stumble against the Braves, but has been a quality start machine. So really, that's 60% of the rotation. Christopher Sanchez, it's not as if he's exhibited as much consistency this season, but still has a 3.17 ERA. Taijuan Walker been way better than we expected. Pitches Friday night to open this Brewers series. So that's we knew it was going to carry the Phillies, but we're really seeing it play out on a series by series basis, that they always have the starting pitching advantage. They always have a couple guys in that rotation that are going well. The key is just going to be keeping them all fresh and healthy, because, the Phillies talked a lot before the season began, Dave Dombrowski, Rod Thompson, about wanting to, protect their starters a little more. And Thompson specifically referenced it with Ranger Suarez, that last year there were so many games where he was at 78 pitches in the 6th or 7th inning. And you're thinking, why take this guy out? He's been so efficient. Just keep extending him. But it's not necessarily always about the pitch count. Sometimes it's about the up downs, getting, back up for the 8th inning when you're not used to that, doing that consistently. So I think that they're going to have to figure out ways as the season goes on to dial back their starters, specifically Jesus Luzardo, because they have put a heavy workload on Jesus Luzardo, and he's responded well to every bit of it. He's gotten stronger as games have gone on. He's held his velocity. He's had better command than he's had in the past. But I don't know that you want him throwing 200 innings this season. I think he's on pace for 195 right now. I think his career highs in around 170. Yeah. If I'm the Phillies, that's the range I'm looking at. Is I want Jesus Luzardo around 170 so that he's Jesus Luzardo in the playoffs. But then again, that's also why the Andrew Painter component of this is so helpful, because you figure he's going to be up here in a month or two. Mick Abel's pitching really well at AAA as well. So 2 very important developments for the Phillies in that regard. Yeah.
Real quick on Luzardo. I mean, that start on, was it Sunday in Sacramento against the A's? He allows the 3 earned runs in the first inning and then comes back and strikes out 10. I think he only allowed 4 or 5 hits. I've been so impressed with that kid. And just the fire that he showed. He struck out, I forget who he struck out there, but just that sequence of events where he strikes him out, he yells, gives a good fist pump. The batter for the A's slams his bat. That's happening. As that's happening, the ump is also throwing the batter out. Dude, the video was one of the better videos of the season. It was just so,
yeah,
so
that was Miguel Andujar and Mark Kotsay, getting ejected. And then Kotsay taking his long walk of shame down the left field line. Yeah, I mean, that was I will say, being in Sacramento, that was definitely the unique element of that ballpark among many, was that So pregame when we're going to the Phillies clubhouse to talk to Rob Thompson or talk to players, it's not just a matter of like going down to the basement level at a ballpark and going into the clubhouse. We literally have to walk through Oakland or Sacramento Athletics batting practice. So as I'm walking to get to the clubhouse, I'm going like this, looking over my shoulder to make sure that no line drives hit the back of my head legitimately because there's BP going on. It's just one of the many quirks. Phillies pitchers did not seem happy with that mound out there. Zach Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez, Jordan Romano. But fortunately for the Phillies, they shouldn't have to go back there until at least 2027, if at all.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness.
You had a good time though. We were showing some pictures. It looked beautiful out there in good old.
Yeah, it's cool in the sense that like these towns that aren't used to getting Major League Baseball all of a sudden have Major League Baseball. But I don't think for the players, I don't think they want it. They don't want these games at Steinbrenner Field or at Sutter Health Park. But it's way worse for those home players, obviously, than teams that have to spend 3 days there. Phillies, though, 2 games up on the Mets. The Mets are going through it right now. Juan Soto here in Booze. I think he hit 226, something like that. Just shows you how much can change in the course of a month over a baseball season. End of April, we're talking about, oh man, how are the Phillies going to beat the Mets? They can't beat them head to head, and the Mets have this big division lead, and they have Soto, and they just keep getting better. And then now you look a month later, the Mets have won 4 of their last 5, but the Phillies still have a 2-game lead. They're feeling better about their overall team. And they're going to meet again June 20 through 22 at Citizens Bank Park. It's going to be an important series just in terms of it's not make or break if you lose the series, if you lose 2 out of 3. But the Phillies at some point do want to remind themselves that they can beat that team. You look at this upcoming schedule, you got Brewers, Blue Jays, Pirates. Phillies have seen them already. They know that they're not good. So, a chance to do some damage over these next 3 series. Like if you can go, say, win a series against the Brewers, and even if you lose a series against the Blue Jays, you could come out of that 6-3 over the next week. Again, that just harkens back to like you look at these upcoming matchups. The Phillies are going to have Wheeler, Sanchez going the first 2 games in Toronto, gives them a great chance. They have Luzardo, Suarez going the final 2 games of this Brewers series, gives them a great chance. And that's the way this team was built, and that's the way it's playing out so far.
And that it makes you, as I'm sure as a fan, it makes you feel very comfortable to just be like, all right, hey. And the whole thing of like, well, they're only beating the bad teams. Okay, well, they're playing who's on the schedule. And they just happen to get hot in May when they're playing these crappy teams of the Rockies and the A's. And I'm not going to say the Braves, but you took 2 out of 3 from a division rival at home. Feels pretty good. You probably could have had a sweep, but Thursday night was not pretty. But you play who's on the schedule. And I believe, I can't remember, I think it was Max Kepler said in Colorado, like, yeah, I'm having the time of my life. This team is having a great time. Everyone's clicking, everyone's vibing. You're also just playing who's on your schedule. And if that is the Rockies for 4 games and you take 4 out of 4 from them, and then also the next day, Colorado beats the Yankees in Colorado, you feel pretty good about yourself, right?
Well,
And we're getting to June. Like, we're getting to June where things are getting hot, man. Like we're in the summer now. The season is in full swing, and you're 36-20, 2.5 games up on the Mets. I'm feeling pretty good.
Well, I mean, we know what happens come June, that the short variant becomes the June variant. But when you were just talking about, sorry, we got to pause. Yeah, and I mean, in terms of playing the teams on your schedule, the Phillies won all of those games, right? They went 7-0 against the Pirates and Rockies during that stretch. 7-0 is different than 5-2. A lot of teams might go 5-2 and be happy with 5-2. The Phillies won all 7 games, so they're not just beating the bad teams; they're sweeping the bad teams, and they're also 13-12 against teams that are over 500, which doesn't sound like it's much, but there's only 2 teams in the National League that have a better record against winning teams, and that's the Mets and the Cardinals. So Phillies have also done pretty well against teams over 500 as well.
It's about time too, right? And that was the whole thing of like, well, again, they're beating these easy teams and they haven't beat these good teams above 500. Well, now they're starting to they're clicking. And again, it comes off the back of this starting rotation. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the pod, the offense is clicking. Speaking of clicking, we'd be remiss not to talk about it. Our good buddy Rhys Hoskins returns this weekend. It's always fun. Last year, when he came back for the first time, I believe that was in June, and that was one of the cooler moments of the season last season. Getting the standing ovation his first at bat, having the fun. He was rounding third, coming home, and he got thrown out at home. JT smacked him on his butt. He smacked JT on his butt. It's just so good to have that familiar face back here, and he's having a pretty good season so far for Milwaukee, who they're not having their best season so far, but Rhys is kind of starting to get a little hot, and it feels good as he comes here to Philadelphia.
Yeah, he's really hot. I mean, he has a 384 on base percentage on the season. It's a higher OBP than Bryce Harper. It's like very close to Kyle Schwarber's. He's been on a real roll over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Brewers just have been, they've been kind of disappointing so far this season. Didn't really spend any money in the offseason. People have talked about Rhys as a potential trade candidate because I think he's in a walk year. He has an option after this year. And I know people have connected it to the Phillies a little bit because you love to talk about a reunion. And there was the conversation that Bryce Harper had with Ken Rosenthal a few months ago where he said that he considered or he thought about or would have been willing to move to the outfield if it meant signing Pete Alonso. I don't see that happening, okay? People have talked about, like, would the Phillies trade for Rhys Hoskins and move Harper back to the outfield and then it solves the outfield? I can't see that happening because within the season is different than having an entire offseason and spring training to think about moving positions, right? Don't think Bryce is doing that midseason, especially given like the health factor, the wanting to preserve his back and his arm and keep him healthy long term. You definitely lose a little bit defensively there. You'd have to give up something to get Hoskins. I don't even know if we're ever going to see that again. If we're going to see Harper move to the outfield, I think it would have to be the perfect situation. It would have to be someone like Pete Alonso, who he's more of a difference maker than Rhys Hoskins. Pete Alonso is a better player than Rhys Hoskins, and that's been borne out in the prices that these guys have gotten in free agency. Nothing against Rhys. He's still, probably like the 15th or so best first baseman in baseball, but Alonso's in a different tier. So I know that's been a big talking point. I just can't see it unless the Phillies suffer a major long-term injury. And the Brewers are also, in the mix. They're still in contention in the NL Central. The Cubs have played really well, but there's not like a clear team that you think is going to run away with that. So I think they're going to, hold on to their pieces. And this will be a good series because Phillies Brewers, if I recall, these were like all low scoring games last year.
They were. Rhys did hit a home run, I think, in the series finale.
But like especially when the Brewers came to Philly, I remember it being, I'm just looking at, the Phillies swept them. The scores were 3-1, 2-1, and 2-0. Those were the three. Yeah, so I mean that's the way the Brewers play. Like they're a pitching and defense and stolen base and try to like execute their way to wins. Phillies are facing in this series. Who do they got? They got some right-handers they're going to see. So Phillies. This is a little bit of a stiffer test from schedule stiffening. It's not Colorado and Sacramento anymore. But again, starting pitching advantages in all these series, in most of these games, and they should have Bryce Harper back here in a couple days, hopefully. So. Hope you enjoy the Phillies Talk podcast. He is Spencer McKercher. I'm Corey Seidman. We'll talk soon.
The June Variant, baby. June Variant.